I won multiple lawsuits against a corrupt businessman who tried to destroy me for breaking his monopoly. I never planned on becoming the center of a legal war in my own hometown. Honestly, when I first opened the liquor store, all I cared about was finally running a business of my own, something simple, honest, and built with my own hands. I was 26, and the only liquor store anywhere near our area was a half-hour drive away, a miserable little monopoly that sold a six-pack of local beer for $15. Everyone complained about it, but no one challenged it. That store had been gouging the entire region for years. I figured I could do better. My friend's mom happened to be president of our local bank. The bank had been trying to stimulate small business lending for months, and she kept saying the board needed young blood, new ideas, something that would breathe life back into town. I told her my plan: buy an old bank building, renovate it, and open a store that sold alcohol at a fair price. Not cutthroat, just reasonable. Where the city store jacked up prices by nearly 80%, mine would sit around 40%. Still profitable, but customers wouldn't feel robbed every time they bought a six-pack. She loved it. The loan was approved within a week. Once the paperwork cleared, I hired my dad, who'd been a contractor his whole life, to help me convert the dusty old bank into a clean, modern shop. We worked evenings after his normal jobs, tearing out yellowed carpeting, patching walls, hauling in shelving units he found at auction. It wasn't glamorous, but it looked good enough when we were done. When we opened in May, I expected a slow start, maybe a few curious locals. Instead, we pulled $4,000 in profit in the first week alone. Tourists passing through to the national forest stopped in constantly, and locals arrived in waves, grateful to pay prices that didn't make them feel sick. My girlfriend and I worked 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week. It was exhausting, but the kind of exhaustion that feels worth it because you're building something real. 3 weeks after Memorial Day, an older man walked in. He looked harmless, white hair, expensive watch, polite smile. He chatted about the renovation, asked about our sales, told me he admired young entrepreneurs. Then, out of nowhere, he offered to buy the whole business. His offer didn't even cover my loan principal. When I told him no, his smile vanished. He leaned in, dropped the polite grandpa act, and muttered, "You'll regret turning that down." Then he walked out. I stared after him, confused but not scared. Not yet. A month later, a sheriff's deputy handed me a packet of legal documents. I was being sued for libel. By a man I'd never met, at least, not by name. When I saw the plaintiff listed, I Googled him, and the photo that popped up made my chest tighten. It was the old man. He owned both liquor stores in the city. He sat on the city council. And the deeper I looked, the uglier it got. The city had a quiet, decades-old ordinance that essentially blocked anyone outside its restaurant and tavern circle from selling alcohol. And guess who chaired the licensing board that enforced that rule? Him. His name was Richard Brennan, and in my naive little optimism, I had opened a business that challenged one of the most powerful men in 3 counties. My uncle, a lawyer in a neighboring state, was the first person I called. I expected advice, maybe a referral. Instead, he said, "Hang on," and hung up immediately. Hours later he called back and told me he'd take the case himself, pro bono. I didn't understand why he cared so much until much later. The libel suit claimed my local newspaper had damaged Brennan's reputation. 3 weeks later, the judge dismissed it. Not because of some technicality, because there was no case at all. My uncle warned me Brennan wouldn't stop. He was right. The next day I was served again. Same lawsuit, different angle. This time Brennan sued me personally instead of my business. 4 weeks later, dismissed. Over the next 3 months, he sued me 5 separate times, each claim as flimsy as the last. Before the 5th hearing, all of us, the judge, Brennan, both lawyers, and me, sat in a settlement conference. The judge, sounding exhausted, asked Brennan's attorney if there was any way to stop this cycle of nonsense. Brennan snatched the paper from his own lawyer and sneered. He should be grateful I'm offering anything instead of suing him into bankruptcy and then buying that dump from the bank. The room fell silent. The judge stared at him. The bailiff raised his eyebrows. Even Brennan's attorney looked horrified. Brennan had said the one thing he shouldn't have said. He admitted the real motive behind every false lawsuit. crush me until I sold. My uncle just smiled. Perfect, he said. My nephew hasn't paid a dime for legal fees. Your little confession just guaranteed we will be the ones suing you soon. Days later, Brennan withdrew his case. But the damage was far from over. The next morning, a health inspector showed up. Anonymous complaint, he said. Rats. There were no rats, but he cited me anyway. A crooked shelf, a dim bulb. $500. The day after that, a fire inspector. 500 more. Then police officers. Reports of underage sales. They watched for 3 hours. Nothing. This became my life. Every day, a new inspector, a new fine, a new accusation. My girlfriend quit from stress. My dad told me maybe I should give up. Then the bank sent a letter. They were calling in my loan early. And that was when I learned the truth. Richard Brennan sat on the bank's board too. I had 30 days to pay everything back or lose the store. I thought that was rock bottom. I was wrong. Because the next day, a stranger walked in, professional, calm, mid-50s. She flashed a badge. Mr. Davidson, she said. I'm Agent Sarah Huffman, FBI. We need to talk about Richard Brennan. Agent Sarah Huffman didn't waste time with pleasantries. She stepped into my stall like she already knew every inch of the place, every shelf, every camera, every exit. She glanced around once, then focused entirely on me, her expression sharp and unreadable. I'm not here because of your business, she said. I'm here because of Brennan. The way she said his name, flat, controlled, with a slight edge, made my stomach tighten. She pulled a thin folder from her bag and placed it on my counter. The cover was stamped with a small block of text I didn't understand, but I recognized one thing clearly: FBI, internal case file. She opened it to a page clipped with a photo. Brennan. Behind him, 2 men stood beside crates in what looked like a warehouse. One of the crates was partially open, revealing packaging that didn't match alcohol branding at all. What is this? I asked. She closed the folder gently, like she didn't want me seeing too much too soon. For the last 2 years, she said, we've been investigating Richard Brennan for racketeering, bribery, tax evasion, and interstate smuggling. Your case, she tapped the folder, gave us the final pieces we were missing. My heart slammed against my ribs. My case. I didn't give you anything except a stack of dismissed lawsuits. You gave us patterns, she said. You gave us motive. And, more importantly, Brennan made a mistake when he targeted you. A big one. I felt myself sitting down without consciously deciding to. My legs didn't want to hold me anymore. She pulled out a second document, printed names, locations, dates, transfers. Half the times meant nothing to me, but the ones that did were horrifying. Why me? I asked. Why my store? I wasn't competition for anything except overpriced beer. Her eyes softened just slightly. Because you scared him. Not with your store alone, but with what your success meant. 3 of his managers resigned within 2 months. 2 applied to work here. Tourists were bypassing his stores to come to yours. You weren't a threat yet, but you were becoming one. And Brennan doesn't tolerate threats. She leaned forward. We need your cooperation. My mouth went dry. Cooperation for what? Wearing a wire. I stood up so fast the stool scraped the floor. No, absolutely not. He already tried to ruin my life. If he finds out I'm helping the FBI, I'll disappear. Or my store will burn down. Oh. She held up one hand. You'll be protected. Every step. But we need him to incriminate himself verbally. We can't close this case without it. I shook my head. I wasn't brave. I wasn't a hero. I was a guy who sold beer and tried not to think too much about losing everything. But then she slid another document toward me. My aunt's name was on it. Judge Linda Marius. I stayed at the page, confused. Why is she? Your uncle called us, she said quietly. The day you first reached out to him about Brennan's lawsuit. My uncle. Jim. My throat tightened. Why? She opened the folder to a clipped page. Incident report. Date. Location. Ruling. Suicide. I felt the world tilt. My aunt. Killed herself. At least, That's what the family said. Agent Huffman's jaw tightened. We don't think she did. I forgot how to breathe for a second. What are you talking about? She turned the page again. Your aunt ruled against Brennan 20 years ago. It cost him several licenses. Within months, false ethics complaints were filed against her. Complaints Brennan, we believe, orchestrated. She was disbarred. Her career destroyed. And 3 years later, she tapped the report. A single car crash. Declared suicide. But the details don't line up. The tire tracks, the phone records, the timing. We believe Brennan was involved. My chest felt like something heavy was sitting on it. You're saying Brennan killed my aunt. We're saying Brennan has a history of removing obstacles. And she was one of them. I sat back down because my legs wouldn't listen. Everything felt unreal. My business, Brennan's lawsuits, the bank loan being called in, the endless inspections, all of it suddenly fit inside a much darker story I never knew I was part of. What do you want me to do? I whispered. Agree to meet with Brennan, she said. Pretend you're ready to sell. Sound desperate. Defeated. Exactly how he expects you to feel. He'll talk. Men like him always talk when they think they've won. I rubbed my face with both hands, trying to process everything, but it felt like trying to drink from a fire hose. And if I help you? I asked. You get your business back, she said. The bank interference will be exposed and reversed. The inspectors who harassed you will be under investigation by tomorrow morning. And Brennan will be arrested. She paused. And there's a whistleblower reward. 7 figures, possibly more. Depends on what we recover. $1 million. Maybe more. But it wasn't the money that made my decision tighten into something sharp and angry. It was my aunt. A woman I barely remembered. A name whispered at family gatherings. A tragedy everyone avoided talking about. Does my uncle know about this? I asked. He knows everything, she replied. He's been helping us behind the scenes. He's been after Brennan for 15 years. I swallowed hard. Why didn't he tell me? Because he needed you to act naturally, she said. If you knew the full scope, Brennan would have sensed something. You gave us exactly the reaction we needed. A cold realization spread through me. So he used me. She didn't deny it. He also protected you. He made sure every lawsuit was dismissed, every motion handled, every gap filled so you weren't alone. I closed my eyes for a moment. 15 years. My uncle carried this hatred for 15 years. And now he saw me, his nephew, as the key to finally bringing Brennan down. It felt like betrayal and protection all at once. Finally, I opened my eyes. When do you need an answer? Tomorrow morning, she said. After that, we move without you. And you lose your business anyway. She left her card on the counter, walked out, and closed the door behind her. The store felt suddenly too quiet, too small, too heavy with everything she told me. I picked up the card and stayed at it. I had no girlfriend anymore. My dad thought I should quit. My uncle had been using me as bait for reasons I didn't understand until now. And the most powerful man in the area wanted to destroy me. But for the first time, I wasn't the one being hunted. For the first time, someone else was scared. I barely slept that night. My apartment felt too small, too temporary, like it was holding its breath along with me. I kept replaying Agent Huffman's words: racketeering, smuggling, bribery, my aunt's suicide, my uncle's 15-year vendetta, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw Brennan's smug face from that settlement meeting, the way he bragged like he owned every judge, inspector, and banker in the county. Around 5 a.m., after hours of pacing, I finally sat at the edge of my bed and stared at the FBI card on my nightstand. I'd been shoved into this war, but for the first time, I felt something other than fear. I felt purpose. When Huffman answered my call on the first ring, she didn't sound surprised. She told me to come to the Riverside Inn, room 247. The place was old, the kind of motel people use when they don't want their names logged anywhere, and when she opened the door, 2 more agents were already inside. Agent Davis, tall with a law enforcement haircut, and Agent Nixon, gray-haired and calm in a way that only comes from decades of stressful work. They laid out everything with mechanical precision. A recording device the size of a thick adhesive patch. A transmitter the size of a car key. A panic button. A folder with a scripted checklist of phrases they needed Brennan to admit. Violating licensing authority, manipulating the bank board, setting inspectors on me, using his position in city council to protect his smuggling routes. Nixon taped the wire to my chest while Davis tested audio clarity, and hearing my own heartbeat thudding in the speakers nearly made me pull everything off and walk out. But I didn't. For 3 hours they drilled me, playing out scenarios, using Brennan's voice, Brennan's tone, Brennan's arrogance. They taught me how to look defeated, shoulders slumped, voice unsteady, eyes down. They told me the one rule that mattered above all: Brennan must believe he already won. Anytime I got too bold in practice, Davis shut it down. "You're not confronting him," he repeated. "You're surrendering. Make him comfortable. Comfortable men confess." Nixon told me not to touch the wire under my shirt, no matter how itchy or sweaty it got. "People get caught because they fidget," he said. "Don't be that guy." When we finished rehearsing, Huffman sat across from me and said something that hit harder than all the training: "He's going to underestimate you. Use that." As they prepped equipment, my phone lit up with Uncle Jim's name. Huffman nodded for me to answer. His voice was rougher than usual, strained, like he'd been awake all night too. "You agreed to help," he said, not asking, stating. I told him yes, and told him I knew about Aunt Linda. For a moment, the line went silent, and when he spoke again, his voice cracked. He admitted he should have told me years ago but couldn't risk compromising the investigation. He said he hated dragging me into this, but he couldn't let Brennan destroy someone else in our family. I hung up feeling more complicated than before, hurt, angry, strangely proud, and more determined than ever. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the motel room trying to sleep, but every time I drifted off I dreamed of Brennan leaning across my counter, whispering that I'd be sorry for rejecting his offer. By 7 a.m. the next morning, the agents had me wired again. Nixon checked the adhesive, Davis listened to test recordings, and Huffman reviewed the plan. She would be listening from a surveillance van half a block away. Backup teams would be staged near the parking lot. I would go in alone. No second chances. No sudden improvising. I drove to my store with 2 black SUVs trailing far behind me. My hands shook the entire way. When I unlocked the back door, the place felt hauntingly normal. The shelves, the faint hum of the coolers, the dust motes floating in the morning sun. I tried straightening things just to keep my hands occupied. At 3 p.m. sharp, a silver Mercedes rolled into the lot. Brennan stepped out wearing an expensive charcoal suit and an expression that said he had already decided how the next hour of my life would unfold. He walked in like he owned the place, gave a slow approving look around, then clicked his tongue. "Shame it didn't work out," he said. I lowered my eyes like the training instructed. "Bank called the loan," I said quietly. "I'm out of options." He smiled. No sympathy, just satisfaction. He sat at my small office table and slid a folder toward me with the same lowball offer he'd made months earlier. "Sign it, and you can walk away with something instead of nothing," he said. "You brought this on yourself." I forced my voice to tremble slightly. "Why did you come after me?" I asked. He leaned back, smirking like a king lecturing a peasant who disappointed him. And then, like the agents predicted, he bragged. He boasted about coordinating the lawsuits, not to win, but to run me dry. He bragged about calling in favors with inspectors to flood me with fines. He even bragged about pressuring the bank board and convincing the loan committee that I was a financial risk. The way he said it made my stomach turn, like he was proud of how easy it was to ruin someone. Then he bragged about the part that mattered most to the FBI, the smuggling routes, the interstate shipments, the friends in government who made sure nobody asked questions. He spoke openly, comfortably, like he believed no one could ever touch him. He even named the judge who denied my injunction and casually mentioned that they golf every Sunday. My chest was slick with sweat under the tape. Huffman's voice whispered faintly in my ear. "Perfect. Keep him talking." So I did. I asked questions like someone desperate for closure, desperate to understand how his life fell apart so quickly. And he answered them, proud of every awful detail. When he finally stood to leave, telling me I had until tomorrow morning to accept his offer or lose everything, agents burst through the front door before he reached the handle. Huffman was in front, badge out, voice sharp and commanding as they ordered him to his knees. Brennan spun toward me, shocked, betrayed, furious, but beneath all that, I saw something else for the first time. Fear. Pure, shaking fear. Agents swarmed him, cuffed him, hauled him upright, and Huffman turned to me with a smile that almost looked proud. "We got everything," she said. "Every word." And in that moment, for the first time in months, I felt like the ground under my feet was solid again, until my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number that made my blood run cold. It said only one sentence: "You have no idea who you just crossed." I stayed at the text message on my phone long after Brennan was taken away, long after the agents finished gathering equipment and packing up surveillance gear, long after the adrenaline faded and left me trembling in the middle of my own store. "You have no idea who you just crossed." The words crawled under my skin like ice. Agent Huffman came over the moment she noticed my expression change, and when I showed her the message, her jaw tightened. She forwarded the number to her tech team immediately, but even before she said anything, I knew what her face meant. Whoever sent it was smart enough to hide their tracks. She told me not to respond, not to delete it, just leave it as evidence. And then she ordered 2 agents to escort me back to the motel where they'd been keeping me the past 2 days. They didn't let me drive my own car. They didn't want me alone at all. Back at the motel, the agents did another sweep of my room, checking for cameras, bugs, anything that might tie back to Brennan's network. They reassured me it was probably an empty threat, someone panicking after hearing about Brennan's arrest. But I saw something in Huffman's eyes. She didn't believe that. Not for a second. She stayed in the room with me for nearly an hour, sitting across from me at the tiny motel table while the old heater clanked in the corner. She explained the next steps. Brennan would be booked, interrogated, transferred. Federal warrants were already being executed at his home, his businesses, the bank board archives, several city offices. She said they were freezing his accounts, seizing computers, pulling phone records, interviewing city officials who'd been suspiciously quiet for years. Everything was moving fast, too fast for his network to hide anything major. But she admitted privately that Brennan wasn't the top of the food chain. He was powerful, but he answered to someone else. Someone with reach across 3 states. Someone they'd been trying to identify for months. And now, thanks to the wire recording, they finally had enough threads to start unraveling that upper layer. Hearing that did not make me feel better. Hearing that made the text message feel more real. More dangerous. She promised they'd keep me safe. I wanted to believe her. But the moment she left the motel room and the door clicked shut behind her, the room felt different. Quieter, like sound itself had been pulled out of the air. I kept telling myself it was over, that Brennan was in custody, that the FBI had got what they needed, that the corrupt inspectors and judges and city officials were next. But the truth was, I had no idea what I'd stepped into. I wasn't just the guy with a small business anymore. I was the guy who had recorded a criminal kingpin confessing to decades of corruption and smuggling. I was the guy who pulled a thread the FBI had been tugging at for years. And threads don't unravel quietly. My phone buzzed again. Not a text, just a voicemail alert. Unknown number. My breathing caught. I didn't want to listen to it, but I forced myself to press play. All I heard was breathing. Slow, steady, controlled. Then a whisper, "You're in over your head." Followed by a click. I froze. The voice didn't sound like Brennan. It didn't sound like anyone I recognized. I sat on the bed, staring at the floor, wondering whether I should call Huffman again or pretend I hadn't heard it. Before I could decide, my phone rang again, this time a familiar name. Uncle Jim. I answered immediately, relief flooding through me, but his first words were urgent and low. "Do not leave your room." My stomach dropped. "Why? What's going on?" He exhaled sharply. "The FBI told me about the text. They traced the number. It's connected to an old shell company Brennan used years ago, one that predates even their earliest files. It means Brennan wasn't acting alone. It means someone else is scared. And that kind of fear makes people unpredictable." I swallowed hard. What do I do? He hesitated before speaking. "You trust the FBI. You let them handle the rest. And you stay where they can protect you." His voice cracked slightly on the last word, not something I'd heard from him since I was a kid. The weight of it made everything feel heavier. He wanted to say more, but he stopped himself. Before hanging up, he added, "I'm proud of you, kid. You did what none of us could do for Linda." When the line clicked off, I held the phone for a long moment, letting the words sink in. Linda. This wasn't just about my store or my business anymore. This was about family, about a woman who'd been erased, about truth buried under years of threats and bribes. I finally set the phone down and tried lying on the bed, but every sound outside the room made me flinch. The ice machine, headlights sweeping across the curtains, footsteps on the walkway. I kept thinking about that breathing on the voicemail, that whisper, that message. Hours passed before there was another knock, 3 short taps. The agents used a specific pattern, so I knew it was them. Nixon stepped in and said they'd identified the sender, but not the individual behind the phone. It wasn't a direct threat, he said, just intimidation. I wanted to laugh. Intimidation was still a threat. Huffman showed up minutes later and told me they were increasing protection until they finished mapping out Brennan's full network. The investigation had exploded into something much bigger. Overnight, 2 city council members had lawyered up. A bank board member resigned abruptly. A fire inspector suddenly went on medical leave. Things were unraveling. The text had probably come from someone bracing for their world to collapse. She told me to get some sleep. "Tomorrow we talk next steps," she said. "You're not done. And neither are we." When she left, I sat by the window, watching the parking lot lights hum against the darkness. I had never felt so exposed in my life, but I also had never felt so certain that I couldn't step away. Not now, not when the truth was finally coming to the surface. But deep down, beneath all the adrenaline, all the fear, all the churn of everything happening around me, a single thought kept echoing. This wasn't even the part one needed to be afraid of. Not yet. The next morning came far too quickly, and when I opened my eyes, it felt like I hadn't slept at all. My phone showed 6 missed notifications from the FBI group chat they created just for my case. Status updates, arrests made overnight, locations cleared, but the one name missing from every thread made my chest tighten. The unknown sender. Whoever had sent that message wasn't part of Brennan's documented circle, which meant there was someone operating outside the pattern the FBI understood. Someone watching. Someone with access. Before I could spiral, there was a knock. 3 taps. The same agent pattern as before, and Agent Huffman stepped inside, holding a thick white folder and a coffee that smelled like it had been brewed with pure determination. She didn't sit. Instead, she stood by the window and flipped open the folder. "We worked all night," she began, voice steady but harder than yesterday. "Brennan's network is wider than we documented, and whoever texted you wasn't bluffing." My throat tightened. She explained that while Brennan was being interrogated in a federal holding facility, he'd made 2 things abundantly clear. 1, he was terrified, and 2, he wasn't terrified of the FBI. He was terrified of someone else. Someone he refused to name, someone he claimed would make what happens in prison look merciful. Every time they pressed him for details, he shut down. That alone told me all I needed to know. This wasn't over. Huffman placed a photo from the folder on the table. It showed a large warehouse, rusted siding, gravel lot, weeds climbing the fence line. "This is where the last unregistered shipment was tracked. 3 states away. We believe it's tied to whoever controls Brennan." She set another photo down. Financial statements, shipping logs, off-books payments, and then one final slip of paper that made my blood run cold, a printout of a text message I'd received. "Same burner number was used once last year," she said. "Only once. To contact a judge in another case. That judge resigned 3 days later. She didn't explain why, but she didn't have to. Another quiet threat. Another life destroyed." She took a breath, and her tone softened. "You need to understand something. What you did yesterday didn't just take down Brennan. It cracked open a sealed door. And a lot of powerful people are panicking." I sat back, absorbing everything. My name was now attached to a federal case that reached far beyond my small town and far beyond Brennan's corrupt empire. And the text message was proof someone wanted me to know they were watching. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. A new message. From Uncle Jim. Just 3 words. "Turn on the news." My hands shook as I grabbed the remote. The TV flickered on, and the news anchor's face appeared over a banner that read, "Breaking. Widespread corruption probe expands. Multiple arrests across 3 counties." Reporters were standing outside City Hall, outside the courthouse, outside the bank. Names were scrolling along the bottom of the screen. Inspectors, council members, board members, people who'd all had ties to Brennan. Every face that appeared made my stomach twist. People who had tried to shut down my store. People who had showed up with false violations. People who had smiled while handing me fines they knew were bogus. The anchor continued. Sources say the investigation is connected to a hidden network that extends across state lines. Federal agents say this may only be the beginning. I turned the volume down, overwhelmed. Huffman watched me carefully. "Everything you're seeing," she said quietly, "started because you didn't back down." It didn't feel like courage. It felt like I'd been shoved into a nightmare I couldn't escape. She sat now, finally, across from me. "You have 2 choices," she said. "Option 1, we put you in protective custody. New location, new routine, constant supervision." My stomach twisted. "Option 2. She hesitated. "Option 2 is that we keep the current level of protection, rotating agents, surveillance, check-ins, while we continue investigating the person behind Brennan. Riskier, but you maintain your life." I asked her what she recommended, and she didn't sugarcoat it. "I recommend protective custody. This situation is higher risk than anything I expected when we started." But I couldn't imagine vanishing from my life. My store was barely holding on. My dad needed me. My community finally believed in me. And running felt too close to losing. Before I could decide, there was another knock, urgent and too fast to be the FBI knock pattern. All 3 agents in the room froze. Nixon moved toward the door silently, hand on his weapon, while Davis positioned himself slightly behind him. Huffman motioned for me to stay back. Nixon cracked the door open just enough to see out, then relaxed slightly and pulled it open the rest of the way. My dad stood in the doorway, disheveled, frantic, and out of breath. "Are you okay?" he demanded. "I saw your store on the news. I've been calling you." No one answered. I thought something happened. Huffman quickly stepped in, assuring him they were protecting me and that I was safe. But he didn't care about the explanation. He went straight to me, gripping my shoulders. His voice broke when he said, "I thought I was going to lose you like we lost Linda." Something in me cracked hearing him say her name for the first time in my entire adult life. He'd never talked about her. None of us had. But now it spilled out. Fear, guilt, everything he'd held back for years. Huffman watched quietly, respectfully. After a long moment, my dad stepped back and wiped his eyes, embarrassed. I told him everything. Brennan, the wire, the threats, the network bigger than anyone expected. He listened, jaw clenched, until I finished, then said, "I don't care what they recommend. Whatever you decide, you're not doing this alone." His voice was shaking but steady, and for the first time in months, I felt something warm push through all the fear. Family, support, a lifeline in the chaos. Huffman finally cleared her throat. "You need to make a decision," she said. "Now. Protective custody or staying here under heavy guard." I looked at her, at my dad, at the buzzing phone still lighting up with new alerts. I knew deep down this wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't about my store or the lawsuits or the fines or the threats. This was about finishing what my aunt had started. And whoever sent that message wasn't done. I chose to stay. Protective custody might have been safer, but it also meant abandoning my store, my community, my father, and everything I had fought for. The moment I said the words out loud, "I'm not running," Agent Huffman exhaled slowly, not relieved, not disappointed, just resigned to the reality that the road ahead was going to be harder. My dad placed a hand on my shoulder, proud and worried all at once. The agents immediately shifted into planning mode. Nixon outlined the new security protocol. 2 agents stationed outside my store at all times, rotating vehicles monitoring the block, a surveillance vent parked inconspicuously across the street, and a direct line to Huffman that I was required to answer no matter what. They moved me from the motel to a small, privately owned rental house the FBI secured under a temporary alias, closer to my store, more controlled, fewer neighbors. Before leaving, Huffman reminded me, You may feel like you're going back to normal life, but nothing about this is normal. Stay alert. Back at my store the next morning, everything looked deceptively ordinary. The hum of refrigeration units, the faint smell of cardboard and cleaning spray, early customers grabbing weekend beer. But beneath it all was a pressure in the air, the sense that something invisible was watching from behind the shelves. The agents stayed out of sight, pretending to shop or parking down the block. But I could feel their presence, a constant reminder that this wasn't over. That someone else in Brennan's network was still out there. Throughout the day, people came in wanting to talk. They'd seen the news. They'd seen the arrests. Some hugged me. Some thanked me. Some looked nervous, whispering theories about who else might be involved. I kept my answers vague because Huffman told me not to reveal anything about the ongoing investigation. Meanwhile, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing, news outlets wanting interviews, other small business owners asking for advice, strangers thanking me for standing up to corruption. I should have felt proud, but all I felt was exposed. Every camera pointed at me, every headline with my name, every person celebrating my involvement made me more visible to whoever sent that message. By early afternoon, I stepped into the back room to catch my breath. That's when the door chimed. I peeked around the corner and froze. A man stood at the counter wearing a black jacket, baseball cap pulled low, sunglasses on despite being indoors. Something about the way he stood, the stiffness, the stillness, sent a primal chill through me. Before I could signal the agents, he reached into his pocket. My heart slammed against my chest, but instead of a weapon, he pulled out a folded piece of paper. He set it on the counter, tapped it once, and walked out without a word. The agents followed him immediately, but he moved fast, disappearing into a white sedan with tinted windows that sped out of the lot before they could catch the plate. Davis rushed in with the note, and when he handed it to me, my stomach twisted. It read, "She wasn't the only judge who refused to play along." And beneath it, a single name. A name I recognized instantly. Judge Guthrie, the same judge who had denied my emergency injunction just weeks earlier, the same man Brennan claimed he played golf with every Sunday. Except Guthrie had been arrested 2 days earlier. The note wasn't a threat. It was a message. A breadcrumb. Proof that someone inside Brennan's network was panicking, or worse, trying to manipulate us. Huffman arrived within minutes, her expression sharper than I had ever seen it. She took the note carefully, analyzing the handwriting, the paper, even the fold. "This isn't Brennan," she said quietly. "He's in a federal holding facility with no contact." My voice shook when I asked the only question that mattered. "So who the hell is it?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she said something far more unsettling. "Someone who wants us to know they exist, but not who they are. Someone watching closely, close enough to know where you work, what you're doing, and how to reach you without touching technology at all." The idea that a new player had emerged, someone even more careful, more connected, more dangerous, made the room feel suffocating. My dad showed up a few minutes later with lunch, and the moment he saw the note, his face drained of color. He looked at me with a fear I hadn't seen since childhood, like he realized he couldn't protect me from what was coming. I told him he didn't have to stay, but he shook his head and said, "I'm not leaving you alone in this." Huffman gathered us both and laid out what they believed now, that Brennan wasn't the mastermind. He was just a front, a corrupt strongman with local power, but the true architect was someone higher up, someone with influence deeper than small-town politics. And that person had a reason to communicate with me directly. "They're testing you," Huffman said. "They want to see how you react. They want to see if you break." I didn't want to show fear, but I couldn't help asking, "What do I do?" She looked me dead in the eye. "You do nothing. We're turning this around. If they want to play games, we play back with federal resources. Let them step into the light. We'll be ready." But the way she said "we'll be ready" didn't comfort me. It sounded like preparation for a storm no one could predict the size of. That night, they placed surveillance on every entrance of my store and the rental house. A second team monitored the streets leading into town. My phone was mirrored directly to FBI headquarters. And still, I couldn't shake the feeling that somehow, despite all of this, the person behind the note already knew every move we made. As the sun set and the parking lot lights flickered on, I stood alone behind the counter, staring at the shelves of bottles that suddenly felt like props in someone else's play. I had agreed to stay and fight. But now, I finally understood something I hadn't before. This wasn't a battle for my business. This was a battle for control, for power, for truth buried decades deep. And I had become the one person the real mastermind couldn't afford to ignore. I barely slept, pacing the small rental house until dawn painted the blinds gray. Every creak in the walls sounded like footsteps. Every passing car made me stiffen. By the time the agents arrived at 7 a.m., I was wired with exhaustion and ready for answers. Huffman walked in with a folder thicker than anything I'd seen so far, set it on the table, and said, "We traced the note." Those words hit harder than I expected. For a second I couldn't breathe. She opened the folder and pulled out a printed map, sliding it toward me. There, circled in red, was a location on the outskirts of a neighboring county, a storage facility, abandoned for over 12 years. "This place shows up in multiple cross-reference records," she said. "Your aunt's old caseload. Several corruption complaints from the 90s. And," she tapped the other documents, 2 sealed federal memos that connect Brennan to someone known only as Marrow. The name alone felt wrong. Sharp. Cold. Dangerous. "Marrow isn't a person we've identified," she continued. "It's a code name. But whoever left that note wanted you, and only you, to know this name exists." My father, who'd arrived just minutes earlier, leaned forward, eyes locked on the map. "What does this have to do with Linda?" he asked, his voice tight. Huffman pulled out another photo. It was of my aunt, standing beside a courthouse bench, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. Beside it was a smaller, grainier picture. The same warehouse, same entrance, same fencing, same dead weeds, dated 5 months before her suicide. This location was tied to an investigation she was working off the record, Huffman explained. She never filed the case officially, but we found references to it in her personal notes. My dad's face crumpled as decades-old guilt rose to the surface. He whispered, "She tried to tell people. No one listened." Huffman nodded gently, because someone made sure no one would. She sat back, exhaling slowly. "We believe your aunt discovered evidence connecting Brennan to Marrow. We believe Brennan reported upward. And we believe the order to silence her didn't come from him." My stomach twisted as the pieces clicked into place. Every warning, every threat, every corrupt official who stepped neatly in line. Brennan wasn't the architect. He was the shield, the distraction, the blunt instrument, and someone above him was still out there. Nixon entered then, carrying a laptop. He pulled up footage from the storage facility security feed, the grainy, outdated kind with a flickering timestamp. "This footage is a week old," he said. "The day before Brennan's arrest." The screen showed a lone vehicle pulling up to the warehouse, an old black SUV. A figure stepped out. Tall, hooded, confident. They approached the building, unlocked the door like it was their personal property, and disappeared inside. "We've enhanced it as much as possible," Nixon said. "Still can't see the face. But this is someone who knows they don't need to hide." The figure stayed inside for 8 minutes before walking out and driving away. No rush, no hesitation, no fear. "We believe this person left the note at your store," Nixon added. "Not as a threat, as a message." My dad frowned. "A message for my son." "A message," Huffman said carefully, "for the one person who reopened the case Linda died for." The room fell silent, heavy, suffocating. And then Huffman said something that changed everything. "We want you to come with us to the warehouse." My heart dropped. "Why me?" "Because whoever left that note didn't give it to us," she said. "They gave it to you. That means they want something from you. Or they want you to see something." It wasn't comforting. It didn't feel like an honor. It felt like being tied to a fuse I hadn't asked to light. My dad immediately objected, but Huffman assured him they'd secure the entire perimeter with tactical units, drones, and surveillance. She promised I would never be more than a few feet from an armed agent. And yet, deep down, I knew the truth. Whoever Marrow was, they wouldn't have left a breadcrumb unless they were absolutely certain they could control the outcome. We left within the hour. 3 SUVs, a caravan of agents, helicopter overhead. The warehouse loomed like a rusted skeleton in the morning light. The air smelled like dust and old oil. Agents swept the inside first, confirming no one was present. Only then did they signal for me to approach. Huffman walked beside me as we stepped into the cavernous space. Sunlight cut through the broken panels and scattered beams. And then we saw it. In the center of the warehouse floor, resting on a crate like a carefully staged exhibit, was a single manila envelope with my name written on it in clean, looping handwriting. My entire body went cold. Nixon approached first, scanning it for traps or devices. Nothing. He nodded for me to open it. The envelope was heavier than I expected, thick with documents. Inside, there were photocopies of case files, handwritten notes, financial statements, shipping manifests, names of judges, council members, bank board officers, and in the corner, a torn photograph. My aunt, standing with a group of people. Brennan was there, but so was someone else, someone whose face had been ripped out of the picture. On the back of the torn piece, in the same clean handwriting as the envelope, were 5 words, "Finish what she started." And my heart hammered in my chest. My hands shook as I stared at the message. My father stepped closer, eyes wide with grief and fury. Huffman took a slow breath. "This confirms our suspicion. Marrow isn't trying to eliminate you." She paused, letting the words settle like dust in the air. "They're trying to use you." Suddenly, everything aligned. The note, the message, the warehouse, the timing. This wasn't an enemy moving in the shadows. This was someone orchestrating both sides of the board, someone who needed me alive, someone who had been watching long before Brennan ever walked into my life. I wasn't just a witness. I wasn't just a victim. I was a variable in a game I didn't know existed. Huffman looked at me with a mix of determination and fear. This doesn't end with Brennan, or the corrupt officials, or the arrests. She placed a hand on the envelope. This ends with Marrow, whoever they are. I swallowed hard, staring at my name on that envelope. My aunt had died trying to expose this. And now, whether I wanted it or not, the fight she started had been placed in my hands. I looked at Huffman, then at my father, then back at the torn photograph.